Nowadays, pretty much every single anime that comes out makes use of CGI, some more than others, but it is very common nonetheless. The anime industry seems to be always under pressure to produce dozens of new shows every season, and with the demand being high, they're forced to speed up the production to cut corners and inevitably deliver a weaker product than initially intended. The primary tool they use to make all this possible is CGI. This tool is nothing new to the industry. CG has been a part of anime since 1983 and it always offered a great advantage for the animation studios. However, the difference between then and now was that you couldn't tell they were using CG unless you knew what to look for. Of course, there were still some horrendous CGI uses even in those older anime, but they were usually very rare and they were explicitly experimental since CG had major limitations. The main purpose of CG was to enhance, it was a creative decision rather than a need to speed up production. Ghost in the Shell, in a sense, a film which came out in 2004, had amazing CG for its time and it even holds up today. Even Cowboy Bebop used 3D models in place of hand-drawn images for rotating space situations, and I bet no one even noticed that. Nowadays, it's simply thrown in our faces, and it seems like no one cares about subtlety, no one gives 2 cents if it distracts the viewer or not. It's like everyone simply accepted it. Usually, the issue with CGI is one of two things. Either it doesn't blend in with everything else and is distracting, like in most of the frames with the CG crowd next to 2D characters and background, or in case of fully 3D anime, they struggle to make the animation of the characters look natural. It's either too stiff or it tries to be expressive but looks kind of awful. Since the 2D character expressions are not restricted by anything, the artist has no limitations other than his imagination, while the 3D is restricted to a model which emulates 2D art style and assets compatible with it. However, there has been quite a bit of improvement in the 3D department, with anime such as Kemono Friends, High Score Girl, Hoseki no Kuni, even Ruby, whether you consider it an anime or not. They definitely show they could make 3D anime work. Now personally, I do not like fully 3D anime, even something rightfully praised for its visuals like Hoseki no Kuni, which is a really big step for the 3D animation, I simply find unappealing. It's just not my cup of tea. I can't get myself to enjoy the CG aesthetic, but I can agree on the fact that it looks gorgeous for a fully 3D anime. One of the reasons I watch anime is because I love the craft of 2D animation, and I guess that's something a lot of us can share. We have come to expect 2D animation from anime, and that's what makes us love them. CGI is fundamentally a different method of animation, and I'll never find it as interesting and enjoyable to look at as something hand-drawn. No CG, no matter how high quality, can mimic that. And that's the issue I suppose most people have with fully 3D anime. It's a different method of animation that tries to mimic 2D. In 2D, there's a lot of exaggeration in regards to pretty much everything. The artists are free to use their creativity to craft their vision. That's why you'll have a character whose body length and size are changed to a ridiculous degree for the sake of emphasizing on a certain scene, or those specific anime reactions and expressions that can't quite be emulated in 3D. The facial anatomy of anime just doesn't make sense in a 3D space because it doesn't follow suitable proportions, hence why it's nearly impossible to rotate an anime model in space. Most anime studios don't take it as far as something like Guilty Gear XRD, an anime fighting game based on a manga which also tries to replicate facial expressions, stretch, line work, and other geometric impossibilities of 2D art, as well as lighting adjustments on top of the frame rate. 3D CG is always perfectly on model, which is, ironically, what makes it look kind of wrong next to hand-drawn stuff, unless imperfections are purposely introduced. And that's pretty much it. Because they try to stay on model so hard, movement tends to look really stiff, especially in contrast with any 2D element, and on top the fact that it's already being done pretty cheaply. Of course, a good artist can play with it and create something more, let's say, westernized, which is what you see in most of the good 3D anime, but unless that artist works for Disney, a company drowning in money, he's not going to succeed too often. 3D is fundamentally not designed to mimic 2D, it's designed to mimic realism. So unless anime drastically changes their aesthetic over the following years, there's literally no chance 3D will replace 2D. CG should be used as an assisting tool to help the 2D animation. I don't think watching emulated hand-drawn animation in full 3D is what people want to see. Which leads me to my next point. What about blending CG into traditional animation? I think we can all agree that, generally, CGI in anime doesn't look great, and that's because it is mainly used as a means to cut corners. But when it's blended in correctly with the purpose of enhancing a scene, you get something like this. I especially love when they incorporate CG in mecha fights. It allows for a much flashier, smoother and intense movement, and this has got to be the greatest mecha fight I've seen. However, when I see something like this, I just can't take it seriously, in the sense that it's hard to immerse myself in the anime when every time a mech appears on the screen, I instantly snap out of it. It feels so unnatural when there's a fully 3D mech on a fully 2D background. And this is definitely not limited to mechs. How can anyone forget the fabulous Goblin Army from Overlord? God damn it, it looks like a sci-fi movie from the 70s. And let's not forget the infamous CG car, or the crowds. I apologize for hurting your eyes. I came to the conclusion that CG either works on a regular anime when it's blended in, or it doesn't work at all. The Monogatari series has quite a bit of CGI in its scenes, especially in Kizumonogatari, but also throughout the entire series. And the reason it works is because the anime intentionally has a disjointed visual style. Same goes for Madoka and most of the anime made by Shaft, except Mekaku City Actors, we don't talk about that. So when they use CGI for backgrounds, characters, objects, it's not distracting as it blends in with their aesthetic. Another common way to blend 3D and 2D is through dynamic camera movement. What is dynamic movement? This. In a dynamic shot, the camera moves or changes its aim within the shot. Of course, this is usually limited to environments to avoid switching between 2D and 3D. For example, the 3D maneuver gear sequences from Attack on Titan, where the camera aggressively zooms in on a scene and maintains a very fast pace when following that specific scene, which allows for incredible complex shots while giving you little to no time to notice the difference in visuals. And that's the key here. You must not notice the CG. And that also goes for the crowds. I don't think CG crowds will ever look good. I can count on one hand the number of acceptable CG crowds I've seen, and this could probably apply to anyone else. The problem is not with the crowds themselves, but with the way the scenes are crafted around those crowds. Let me explain. The CG crowds in Shirobako. They still work and look stupid if you focus on them, but the scenes are laid out and crafted such that you will never focus on them. The tools weren't any better, just the stuff utilized them more effectively within the tool's limitations. And that's the catch. CG shouldn't distract the viewers when it's not used to enhance a scene. And on the topic of enhancing, of course I have to mention Ufotable, the anime studio which developed their own unique animation style blending traditional animation with CGI. The secret behind Ufotable is in the amount of special and post-processing effects they use in every cut. It's just blowing me away. And that is thanks to their digital team. Here are a couple of examples of shots with and without added effects. Without question, they have the most incredible fine-tuning, because everything about their style is mesmerizing to watch. Granted, they do benefit from having their own in-house CG team. Most anime studios outsource their CG work, which is one of the reasons it generally doesn't look that great. But that doesn't apply to Ufotable. Their CG team is just upstairs from the animators, which makes them the best digital studio. And they also make their own 3D backgrounds, but I'll leave that for another video. The bottom line, and also the irony regarding CG, is that if it's done well, nobody even notices. But when it's done wrong, oh boy. And the truth is, CGI is probably going to become more and more common as it becomes harder for the economics of 2D animation to catch up with the demands of the industry. And the obvious issue here is that time is required for good CG, and the industry lacks time. If it were a choice between studios making something look good or using CG to cut corners, they would probably want it to look good, as it would definitely look better on their portfolio. That's all for today's video. Thanks for watching and I hope you enjoyed it.